Welcome to the Peak SFU podcast. I think it's called Peak Speaks, but this is the first one that I'm doing. So I first want to start off with just a blanket trigger warning. We're going to be talking about mental health, specifically anxiety and our specific mental health disorders. Alongside that, we're not going to be talking about anything graphic.
Yeah. Wow.
No, we're not going to be talking about anything graphic, but it may be possibly distressing for anyone who is suffering from these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be heavy. It's going to be feely.
Lord knows
talking about things.
I'm suffering from these things.
My name is Quinn. I am a film major at SFU in the School for the Contemporary Arts. I am in my third year of school with a decent number to go. And I have currently been officially diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder and ADHD.
My name is Will. I am a third year film major. Well, technically it's my fifth year, but it's my third year in the film program. I have been diagnosed with, I guess it's general anxiety disorder. I don't know, to be honest. When I was a kid...
Don't you also have social anxiety disorder?
Yeah, but I don't know what is diagnosed.
Yeah,
You know?
I think the diagnosis process, at least in my personal experience, is quite hit or miss. I just got given a little fill-out sheet by a walk-in clinic doctor who was just I think I might have ADHD, they were like, we think you have anxiety. So they gave me a little fill-out sheet, which I had done before at that point, at random points in my childhood.
Yeah.
And I was ticking, I was at max at all ends for anxiety, generalized anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, oh yeah, you definitely have it. And I was like, okay. They're like, well, we can prescribe you some meds. And I'm like, well, I didn't come in here for my anxiety. I came in here because I think I might have ADHD.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
It's interesting, your experience with it, because I think you and also probably a lot of other people had it very clearly diagnosed to you.
My anxiety?
Yeah. Whereas I feel for me, I kind of learned about anxiety, or that I had anxiety, from going to child specialists when I was a kid.
Oh.
And them just being yeah, your kid has anxiety, to my mom. I don't remember ever being given a formal diagnosis. And I know there's a lot of overlaps between types of anxiety, but I feel there's more generalized ways that anxiety pops up, and then there's stuff like social anxiety, which is obviously they're intertwined, but I also think they're different in a lot of ways.
I wouldn't say that my diagnosis is technically official because the doctor was like, yes. The thing is that it was just always an accepted part of my psyche. My parents, ever since I was little, they're like, you worry too much, but you come from a family of warriors, so this is how it is. And I would see the traits of my anxiety in my dad and my family on his side, and they would point it out consistently, but they were never let's go to a doctor to find help about this. They don't like to hone in on defining what may be a weakness, or what may be a chip on the shoulder for me, as a child. My family is always very much well, we didn't want to define it. We didn't want to label you as having an issue. They were also like this about ADHD, because apparently one of my grade 2 teachers was like, hey, I think your child has ADHD. And my parents were like, okay. And didn't really put that onto me, because they've illuminated to me that in their minds, by defining these issues, it's sort of like the thing of when a kid is looking around, looking to see if someone's going to see them crying. They're trying to look around and see who's going to make that connection. And then if someone looks at them with worry, they know to start crying. It kind of creates this reaffirming pattern of
sure.
I can't do it, which I definitely think happens to a certain extent. It just sucks when you when it's not that fixable by just pretending that it's not there, or pretending it's a part of this wider web of just being a human, when you know that you're different than everybody else.
Yeah.
Or you know you kind of process things differently, or you're struggling with something. And that was something that really happened with my ADHD, but I think also happened with my anxiety, of sort of like, oh, this is a normal part of life. Like, you'll learn to manage it, you'll learn to live with it, which I think, you know, is sort of a peaceful way of approaching mental illness, but is also maybe not the most productive when you're in the throes of it, or in the throes of like, why can't I just relax? Why can't I just go talk to these people? Why can't I, you know, just unwind? Why do I have to fix everything?
I think I developed a similar perception towards anxiety in some ways. The way that I knew about anxiety, or the way that anxiety existed to me when I was a kid, was that my sister has very intense anxiety, but it's not as much social anxiety. My sister has really bad emetophobia, which is vomit phobia, and it was something that she struggled with a lot throughout high school especially. And so my perception of anxiety was that it was this thing that, like, either you had it or you didn't, and if you had it, it could be a debilitating, like, it was not something I saw that you could exist with on a daily basis. And so my struggles with anxiety were always kind of based around, like, I have to get rid of this feeling, or it didn't come from a place of acceptance. And that was something that I struggled with for a long time, like a very long time. And I don't think it's something that goes away. And it kind of sounds like that ties into what you're saying as well. You have these feelings that you feel like shouldn't be there, and other people, like your parents, might tell you that they're not even really there, or that if you think that they're there, it'll just make them worse.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well,
it's like,
what the hell do I do now?
I think because I am such a worrier, and I've been such a worrier since a young age, like, that's sort of how I kind of define my anxiety, is that I think I definitely have a bit of social anxiety, but I'm ultimately a worrier. I need to know it, and it's funny because it ultimately, like, contradicts sort of like the more impulsive aspects of my ADHD. So I'm like constantly, like, my brain is at war on two sides of like, I need less organization, I need to be flexible, I need to just go with the flow, I hate rules, I hate organization. And then, like, my anxiety is like, no, but you need to know every single possible outcome to a situation, or else you're going to, like, die.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that I think I come across as a relatively chill or outgoing or, like, less anxious person, but present me with an issue or even a minor, like, frustration, and then you'll see it all kind of wind out. You'll see it all spill out of, like, me being like, I have to fix this, or I start hyperfixating on it, because that's sort of what happens. And I think that ties into, I've always been a bit of a worrier, and I've always been a bit of a worst case scenario type of person. I constantly get, like, intrusive thoughts about worst case scenarios, about the worst possible outcome happening. I don't really have the habits in place of, like, preventing these, other than, like, the superstition of, like, knocking on wood. I do that all the time. But beyond that, I don't have a lot of, like, habits in place that I have to do, or compulsions that I have to do to prevent these things, aside from fixing them. But I have a lot of worst case scenarios going on in my brain. And that's how it's been since I was a child. But yeah, is that I was always labeled as a worrier, and therefore my issues and my concerns with myself, because I would have a bit of, like, overanalyze, or, like, really focus in on myself. And my parents would see that, and this worrying and this constant, like, analyzing of myself as a means to disregard my concerns, or a means to see it as, oh, I'm just working myself up. And so when I'd have a valid concern and be like, I think I have ADHD, I match all of the symptoms, they'd be like, well, you match all of the symptoms because you're thinking about them.
Yeah.
Or, I have anxiety in this, and they'd be like, yeah, we do think you have anxiety. But that's therefore why we're not going to take any of your other bodily concerns seriously, because you're just stressing yourself out. You're worrying.
Mm-hmm.
When people see you as a worrywart, they take you less seriously when you might be accurately picking up and diagnosing yourself and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had similar feelings with ADHD where, sometimes I wonder about the way I think sometimes, the way I feel sometimes, and it's hard to know if I can attribute it fully to anxiety or if there's something else that's affecting me somehow. And I think that's a weird feeling to have. I mean, for me personally, I recently started therapy, which is funny because my mom's a therapist, or she was a therapist. I recently started professional therapy.
Professional therapy?
Well, not my mom. Not familial therapy. Establishing not solutions but techniques and habits for looking at my anxiety and looking at it in a way where it's not something that I can get rid of or that I should get rid of, but that there are ways of sculpting patterns of behavior that can help, I guess, alleviate it or just make it more comfortable to exist with anxiety in a given moment, or over a series of moments. That helps with alleviating the stress a little bit of worrying if I have something else like ADHD, because there are always techniques you can employ and practice, and it's all practice. I mean, anyone can look at these techniques and use them in a way that's beneficial. It's just about finding what works for you and practicing. And obviously, that's not to say that there aren't people that need the help of something like medication to exist with ADHD or a variety of other disorders.
I think it's definitely a multi-pronged approach. I mean, I take medication for my ADHD now, but that's because it's a tool. It doesn't I think it's the funny thing is that people, especially I would say of the older generation, see medication as a dangerous element, as a dangerous thing because of, definitely I think they grew up with the war on drugs, and a lot of some of these medications, especially ADHD medication, are regulated substances. They are regulated and controlled because they have the potential to be addictive. I think people see these drugs as these sort of mystical, dangerous, super science things that will help you get ahead, but are also really dangerous, but are also this. When it's no, they can be dangerous for sure. Everything in moderation, everything with its correct use and dosage. And if you don't have the disorder, don't use it. It's not going to really help you, honestly. Or it's not actually functionally helping you.
Yeah.
I think people forget that medication is just a tool, and in and of itself, it's a neutral thing. It is a neutral being, and it is its application and its use where things can get negative or positive.
Yeah.
For me, ADHD medication has been really positive because I've been able to quiet down my brain a lot. I was sort of a realization that a lot of my anxiety came from the fact that I was constantly understimulated. Through stress. I think that the stress came from a constant need for stimulation and this constant fear of boredom that was sort of ingrained in my brain because it was very understimulated. And so gaining medication allowed me to relax a little bit more. Again, I'm still here talking about my anxiety, so I still have it because these are still also patterns and cyclical ways of thinking, and it's sort of how my brain has been socialized and grown up within the world has been in relation and in connection to my anxiety. I would be interested if I had been diagnosed with my ADHD sooner, if I would have a lot less anxiety. Nowadays, if I had received the proper care and treatment when I was a kid, if I would be a lot more chill. Today, despite having medication that reduces a significant portion of what my old anxiety used to be like, I still have a lot of anxiety in different forms, which can be quite frustrating. And it's not just stress. it's debilitating. It feels like sometimes I'm fighting against a wall or I'm fighting against sandpaper because certain things have to be a certain way, or I can't accept not knowing. You know, it's this deep ingrained fear that has turned itself into patterns and behaviors. I think what I'm interested in, or what I want to ask you more about, because we've discussed before, we've touched on this before, but what I want to ask you about is, how was it moving into university? Because I met you first year of film school, which you had already been at university for a while before that, and you've talked to me about how when we first met, your anxiety was like still fairly high, especially your social anxiety. And so I'm just interested to, if you're comfortable sharing like what that sort of transition into university was like, and what were sort of the things you found yourself unable to do that you can do now? Yeah. Or stuff that you're still struggling with? I don't know. Very broad.
So I was in university for 2 years before film school. Just over halfway through my first year of university was COVID. So of my first 2 years before film school, a year and a half of it was online. But I was really grateful for that at the time, because when I started university, my social anxiety was like fully debilitating for me. In a sense where my anxiety levels now are still quite high, but I have way better ways of managing them, and I've also pushed myself through a lot of experiences that have made me really anxious so I could show myself that I was able to do these things. And I feel like that sounds really simplistic, but that's kind of just the best way I can describe it, is that I knew that I had to do these things in order to understand my anxiety better and to come to terms with it in a way. Taking generalized classes that had like 200 people and going to tutorials. Like going to tutorials was so hard for me. I was like, I can't do this. Like sitting in a room where it's just like 10 people and I don't know anyone. I was like, I can't do this. Like, that's insane. Who is able to go to these tutorials and sit there and not? And now it's like, obviously I know that, you know, the majority of other people were also super anxious. I can definitely relate to how you describe some of the more debilitating aspects of your anxiety, where it's like, it does kind of feel like sandpaper, or it feels like something physical where it's just so uncomfortable. And like, that is not easy to work around, especially when it's like, that feeling is so visceral in the moment, and the ways that you are told to deal with it are so long term in a way where it's like, well, you have to start at square zero and work your way up and push yourself through these experiences. And it's like, yeah, well, I don't want to push myself through these experiences because it sucks. I mean, for me, it was something where I knew I had anxiety, but I didn't know how to deal with it at all. And I didn't know if I could deal with it. Yeah, given those experiences I had with anxiety before I had started taking steps to improve my relationship with it, I guess I would say. I'm curious to hear about your experiences with ADHD.
I had always known two things. I had always known that generally, or for the most part, I always knew that I had anxiety because I was a worrywart and everyone pointed that out to me. I also knew that I was different. I didn't know that I had ADHD. I didn't find that out until I was 17. Fundamentally, like, I knew that I was different. People pointed it out to me constantly that, like, I was weird, I didn't fit in. I very much had, like, the social cripplings of, or, like, the social awkwardness aspect of being neurodiverse. I have a very hard time, or I had, and I still somewhat, to a certain extent, have a hard time with, like, social boundaries, or, like, understanding faux pas, or understanding certain social cues. Harder for me to read. I'm a very emotional person. My emotional dysregulation is off the charts. And so people would point those aspects out to me. They'd be like, you're weird, you're lazy, and you cry a lot. And so I knew I didn't fit in, and I really developed an anxiety around my personality and being liked and being accepted. Mm-hmm. I knew that I looked cute. I loved the way that I looked. I didn't have any, I felt, I'm very lucky. I didn't have any sort of like physical like insecurities or anything, but I was incredibly insecure about my personality. Mm-hmm. I was like, people think I'm great until I open my mouth. Hit puberty, that's when my emotional dysregulation went off the charts, and I really felt like I was beginning to feel like I was in a soap opera. I know now that emotional dysregulation and hormones with ADHD are a very common disruptive mix that like really destabilize a person or destabilize a lot of feminine people. So I felt like I was in a soap opera, but I didn't know I had ADHD, so I thought I was just having really bad PMS. Yeah. And it would sort of spiral, and then it would combine with my anxiety, and then I'd have these massive panic attacks about things insanely out of my control. The very first one I remember, it was I'd overworked myself on Christmas, so a little bit of burnout as well. And I remember watching a video about a potential meteor striking Earth, and I just crumbled, and I had a massive panic attack alongside this very big existential dread. And I would say that then it lasted for about a month, and then suddenly it went away again, and I felt like myself again. And then for a few years after that, it would be almost annually, like every winter, I would get a huge panic attack, have this severe depressive episode, have these really intense, like very scary thoughts, and then it would get better. And it was sort of becoming this cycle, which I now know is because it was a combination of my anxiety, my existential fears.
The feeling you described of like, knowing that something is wrong, something feels wrong. Not that something is wrong, but that something feels off. I think it's something that a lot of, if not everyone, experiences when they're a teenager. Yeah. And no matter what that feeling ends up being diagnosed as or determined to actually be, it's like, I think that's a very universal experience for people where, I think everyone has their own gauge for when something doesn't feel right, or something feels bad. And it's like, this thing feels bad.
I feel like the depth of my I felt like anxiety just wasn't a big enough explainer, because I was beating myself over the head being like, why am I weird?
Yeah.
Why can't I just fit in? There are other people I know who have anxiety similar to me, but they don't have a problem saying the right thing in social situations. They don't have a problem, why do I say too much? Why do I overshare? Why do I over-explain? Why don't I think the same as other people? And that was something that just wasn't fundamentally being explained by having, is that what I lack the ability to think before I speak, or really think through before I speak. I've said this a million times, but I really resonate to that Michael Scott quote where he goes, I don't know what I'm going to say until I say it. That's sort of how I operate. I don't know what I'm going to say until I say it. Just to kind of tie it back to like SFU, or like have you found, do you use any of the resources at school?
I haven't used their resources myself, but my sister used them a lot, especially for midterms and exams. Yeah. Because of her anxiety. I know roughly a lot of the standards and procedures they have. And I think that's a great resource. I mean, it's a necessary resource to have. I think that, like SFU having counseling options is great. Again, haven't tried them myself.
Yeah. This is also coming from your personal, opinion and perspective. This isn't like a blanket term. If it works for you, if SFU mental health stuff,
if it works for you, it's amazing. And also,
awesome and great.
My
and
opinion is not affiliated with the Peak. I am not affiliated with the Peak. I am my own private entity. I am not speaking on behalf of any institution or organization. Anyway, my sister did counseling at SFU. I think she found it helpful, but it was very much tied to the person that she was talking to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she just connected with him a lot. It's great that there are certain programs in place now, but at a university institution, I think that there should be more like individualized options for students.
Yeah, I think also my biggest critique is when I did one-on-one therapy, because the resources are limited, it's hard for it to feel constant.
Yeah.
Because they only allot a certain number of sessions because there's so many students and there's so many people who need help, and they have to be able to, get to everybody, and so they only grant you a certain number of sessions, and for me that fundamentally doesn't work. Like the support group worked because it was consistent throughout the term, but I was sad when it ended because for me, I think fundamentally it's not necessarily like I need a crisis counselor. I don't need someone to help me in an immediate moment.
Yeah.
Or to have it to help patch up a portion of my life. I need a consistent.
Yeah.
I need consistent sessions because my anxiety can spike really rapidly and go down. I'm a very all at extremes person. There's not a lot of in between, or when I am in the in between, it's for a very brief moment. And so I need consistency. I need somebody who's sort of a constant force that I can be like, this is something I'm stressing out about this week, or oh, this week is chill. And I don't want it to feel like I have a sort of deadline to be better or fine by, because I think that is, I think in general with mental health, that's really contradictory, because therapy is a checkup. It is a consistent thing that once you engage in, you need to consistently attend. It's like going to the dentist almost.
Yeah.
It's like going to the dentist, it's like going to the doctors. It's like these general checkups that you need to do to keep your brain health healthy. And I think fundamentally that just waiting until you desperately need it, or using up your certain allotted amount of sessions that you're allowed, whether it's your school allocation of how much you're allowed in a semester, or if it's even your insurance of how much you're allowed to access through your job. How do we prioritize, and how do we really take into the fact that mental health isn't an isolated individual problem? It's also created by and reinforced by the society that we live in and the oppressive structures that we are affected by. And I think for me as well, I can easily point to, I think also a lot of my anxiety comes from this need to constantly output work. My first panic attack started with burnout and started with overworking myself at the age of 14 to make presents for people for Christmas, because I didn't have the money to buy presents and I wanted to make something homemade and meaningful. But why is it even possible for burnout to be a thing that can happen to kids?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a very huge concept, but I think...
No, for sure. I completely agree.
I think throughout every level of society, we need to have more of a concern for how we take care of each other.
Absolutely.
And what do we expect of each other?
Yeah.
Just want to say thank you.
Of course.
So
thank you for having me on.
Helping me set up everything.
My pleasure.
For being on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for listening and bringing back the podcast. Yay.
Yeah.
Don't forget to subscribe or just check out more of the Peak Multimedia and overall article content.
For sure.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.